In this video, let's adjust the compositing for our animation to save some render time. Now let's switch over to compositing and see what we got here. First of all the render layers we had before were now replaced by the creature render layer, basically all the render layers which we deleted. The good thing though is that we want to use the creature render layer now also for the environment, for the creature, let's move this down here a bit, and also for the mist. And since we have all the passes outputs here as well, everything still works as before. The only thing now is that we have the red light from the ground lights everywhere. So let's take care of this first. Let's go down to the creature, and here we have a couple of new outputs. So let's hold down Ctrl Shift left click and see what we have. However, here you have to switch to the viewer node to see the different outputs. So this is the image output, then alpha, the mist, emit, this is all what we know. The crypto you can ignore, we don't need these outputs here. We have these denoising outputs for the denoise node. However, what we really want here are the different light groups. We have the main light, creature light, and the ground light. That looks pretty cool though. And now if you want to mix multiple light groups back together, all you need to do is to hit Shift A and add a mix node. Set the blend type to add and then add it over here, and then simply add the other light group into the second input. And now we have the default light plus the red lights of the creature. Now you can see when I change the vector, the red light disappears. And now in between here we can do any changes we like. For example, we can add a hue saturation value node to the red lights and change to hue. So we can change the color of the lights. Pretty cool. Or we can add an exposure node here and make the lights stronger. So we now have full control over the different lights, and if you want to add more light groups, you can just duplicate this add node and add the next light group over here. And then again, you can decide how much the light should impact this render layer. And maybe we just add a tiny bit of red light to the rest of the creature here, which I think looks quite cool. And then we just have to put it back into the exposure, and we basically have exactly what we had before, except that this is super noisy. However, there's one issue I noticed, and that is the blue glowing parts of the eyes are not really glowing here on the different light group layers. As you can see, it's pretty dark compared to this one here. So I want to add the glowing eyes from the image output on top here. And for this, let's make use of the cryptomat. So let's search for cryptomat, add it over here. Since we will use multiple cryptomats, let's press F2 and call this one eye mask. And all we need here is basically this little plus button. I can click this, then the eyedropper appears. And now when I hover over my image, you can see all the different names from the different objects. And if I hover above the eye, you can see Epic Creature IR appears. And if I click this, this will be added to this mat ID list. And if I now Ctrl Shift left click over here to the mat, we now have the eye masked out. However, we are not working on a still image here, we are working on an animation. So the head of the creature is turning from one side to the other. So we also have to add the other eyes. However, in our scene, the eye is of course on the other side. And from this perspective, we can't pick the other eye with the eyedropper here. So what we also can do is to switch over to the outliner. Then go to the Epic Creature, and here we have the two eyes. So let's simply copy the name of the left eye, add a comma here, Ctrl V, paste this. And then let's also add the iris from the left eye and the iris from the right eye. And in this way, we now have a perfect mask for only the eyes up here. And that means if I want to add the eye output from this image here using this mask, we simply need a mix node, plug it behind here, add this color input, and then connect the mat output to the mix factor here. And now you can see that we added the eyes on top. So if I mute this node with M, you can see the difference. Pretty cool. So this is a creature setup. Let's move this down here, Shift Home. This is a creature layer basically, and now we also want to change the color and brightness of the environment layer. So what we want to do is to mix the main light group with the ground light group. So let's add a mix node, change this to add, mix the main with the ground. Then we have this output here, and this we plug into the hue saturation value node to desaturate the environment and also make it a bit darker. So and now we need to mix those two together. However, in order to make this work, we need a new cryptomat. So let's duplicate the eye mask down here. And by the way, we have the image input, pic output and image output, but we don't need all this for this compositing setup. So let's press Ctrl H when this node is selected. So everything which is not connected will be hidden. And now we only have the mat output. And now we can duplicate this, Ctrl Shift D, then press Alt P to get it out of the creature frame. Move it up here, press F2, let's call it creature mask. And for the creature mask, we only need all the eye stuff, so we can leave it here as it is, plus the whole creature. And now this here is our mask. And all we need to do now is to plug this mask into the mix factor of the alpha over node. And now, as you can see, we have this thing only affecting the ground and this stuff only affecting the creature. Let's move this into the environment frame here. So let's move this stuff a bit over to the side, and next we want to add the background to our current setup here. And the reason I rendered the background on a separate render layer is that otherwise, when we have everything on one layer, we get sometimes a mixture of the background into the mask here on the edges, because the background is pretty bright. So I decided to have the background rendered separately, so we have very clean edges here on the creature. However, when we look over here, the background is just black. Because of what we have set up down here, the background is just black. So we need to create a mask which basically includes everything here in the foreground, so we can cut this out from the background. And then we can use this mask to make the black area transparent for the background. So and for this, let's duplicate the creature mask, Shift D, Alt P to get it out the frame. Let's press F2 and let's call it environment mask. And here we not only need the creature, but everything else as well. So let's click the plus, let's add the beach ball. And for the beach ball, very important, we have two ball objects. Also the ball explosion, let's copy the name, add a comma and paste it here. And then let's also add all the other elements here, like the big rocks, the grass elements, the ground. And in order to see a little bit better what's going on here, let's quickly add a mix node, plug it here, add the image output from over here, and then let's mix these a little bit together. And then I think we can better see what objects we have added already. For the particle system, we have used quite a lot of grass objects, and this is why we have to pick the grass multiple times. Some rocks are still missing. And I think that's everything if I'm not mistaken. Let's have a look. Yeah, everything is right. So we can remove the mix node here. And then we have our background mask, which we can plug into this alpha over node. And now you can see we have the background. So now we have the creature, the environment, the background. Now we only need to adjust the ball here before we get over to all these effects over here. So let's grab all this stuff and move this a bit over. Then let's grab the environment, for example, including the frame, Shift D, move it over here, Shift D, alpha over. Then connect this to the lower input and this to the upper input. And now we have to create a mask for the ball. Let's press F2. Let's call it the ball mask. And here let's remove everything. And we only want to have the beach ball and the beach ball explosion. And this should be plugged into the upper input here. So that means we can now adjust the beach ball. Maybe let's also rename this with F2 into ball. And first of all, let's set the saturation back to 1, value also back to 1. And then let's see how we can adjust the color of the ball. And I think here we need to swap the inputs. Yeah, and now you can see I can change the hue of the ball, for example, and all the other stuff. However, here for the ball, I just want to mix the main light and the creature light. And let's hold on Alt, left click and move this hue saturation node between the render layer node and the add node, so it only affects the main light. So we are not affecting the red light, because when changing the hue here, for example, we don't want to change the red light on the ball. So now we can change anything here, and I played around with this already, and I think I want to change the ball color into a more blue tone. Maybe something like this. And we can also make it a bit brighter. The ball should really pop out a bit. So and now let's see if the rest of our setup is still working. So next we have the mist. Let's Control Shift left click here and you can see the color of the ball is changing, and that's because we have not connected this correctly. So this is the output we want to connect over here, and then let's unplug the second output. And now we have our blue ball, and if I mute this node you can also see how the mist effect is added on top. By the way, if I Control Shift left click here, we can see the mask which we used without the background, and you can see that there's this white outline around everything, and this can also lead to these dark edges here. So what we can do is to search for the dilate erode node and plug this basically here behind our alpha input. And with this node we can basically shrink or grow our masks. So and in this case I want to shrink the mask a little bit. Let's have a look. So the dark edge is not too strong anymore. So this is how it was before, and you can see in this way we can reduce this. Pretty cool. Then next let's check our scales glow. Still working nicely. Sky glow. Then next we have our grain, which will make the whole image a bit darker again. And the grain is animated, by the way, so the grain randomness will be different in each frame, so it also works for the animation. Then we have the lens distortion for a little bit of chromatic aberration and the vignette effect. So everything is still working, which is super cool. That means we can move all this stuff a little bit closer back to the rest. So here let's switch over to the render result, and you can see it looks quite different because sometimes the composite output here is not updating. To fix that, simply select any node in your setup, press M to mute it and then unmute this again. Then the compositing will recalculate and then it should work as expected. Let's press Control Space and full screen this, Shift Home button, and now let's press J to switch between these two render slots. And as you can see, the scene in general looks pretty much exactly the same. However, the scales are glowing a bit less, and of course everything is still super noisy. So we have to add the denoise node, and the denoise node we will add right before we add all this glowing stuff. So simply hit Shift A, search denoise, and then from any creature render layer pick the denoise normal, the denoise albedo, and then over here pick the image output from here, plug this into image, and then wherever this node goes we need to plug this in. So and then let's see if the denoising works. Et voila, now everything is denoised. And for the glowing bits of the big scales, here we have the glare node, and we basically need to brighten up the input here. So let's switch back to the viewer node so we can see what we are doing here. So let's brighten this up. Let's try an exposure node, set it to 1. This will be brighter. And then let's check if this is closer to the original render. So let's switch to the render result, of course. Then again press M over here and M once again, so this actually updates. And then let's press J once again to see the difference. So the glowing bits are a bit different, but I think I still like it, so that shouldn't be a problem. Only the ground here seems to be a bit darker in our new setup. So maybe let's increase the brightness of the environment here a bit by increasing the value here of the hue saturation value node. Oh, maybe this was a bit too much. Yeah, this is pretty equal, and I think I'm quite happy with what we have here. So since we now changed all the compositing, let's actually see how long a frame would render with the rendering plus all the compositing. So for this, let's go to Layout, hit Escape, and let's go to a completely different frame, maybe here where the ball is flying through the air, and then let's re-render this and see how long this will take. And yes, that looks pretty good. And before we had 2 minutes 32 seconds, so it's only 1 second longer, which is not a big deal, of course. So and that means we are done with adjusting the compositing, and that means we can now finally move over to render out our final animation. But we will also check out some render settings to speed up the whole rendering process even more. However, this we will do in the next video. But before we jump over, as always, don't forget to save.